Okay. All right. So once again, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. If I have not met you previously, my name is Erin Bafero. I'm the School Safety Program Manager here at the Northwest Educational Services District. We oversee and support school safety services for 36 school districts in the five Northwest counties of Washington State. And we're so pleased today to welcome a couple of partners from the Washington State Coalition Against Domestic Violence. We have Elise Morris here. She's our executive director for Cultivating Healthy Athletes Who Move with Purpose, or CHAMP. She's also the director of community outreach and expansion with TeamUp Washington. She is a multi-level athlete as well. She's a busy person, so we're so happy to have her with us. We also have Ward Urian, the senior prevention strategist at the Washington State Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Again, thank you both so much for being here. They have a lot to share with us. So I think without further ado, I will turn things over to them, and I'm just going to ask too if folks wouldn't mind keeping your cameras on. That it helps with engagement and it helps with discussion. And I know that Elise and Ward will provide plenty of time for questions after they share their program here. So again, Elise, I will turn things over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Erin. Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. We're going to go into introductions in just a little bit. But yeah, I want to encourage people to use the chat function. Navigating this Zoom space is always um, a practice that looks like we'll be sticking to for a while. So just excited for engagement. Again, we will be having a Q&A portion at the end of the session, but feel free if any questions come up to put them in the chat, and we'll circle back around to them at the end. Or do you have anything to add before we jump in?
Yeah, no, just would love, we reserve plenty of time for Q&A, and so really would love to have your discussions, thoughts, feedback, etc. And I also just want to call out a special thanks to Bryn for helping to launch this, and Aaron and Aram for making it happen, and really appreciate the effort and also the opportunity to be with you, and hoping that this is first of many, hopefully.
Wonderful. Okay, fantastic. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself. Hi, everyone. My name is Elise. I am the Community Outreach and Engagement Coordinator at TeamUp Washington. I also have a special relationship to this program. I was lucky enough and privileged enough to be one of the first athletes who went through this program. After its pilot stage, it was created at my high school, Garfield High School in the Seattle, Washington area. So I have gone through the program as a young athlete. I then came back and was so moved and inspired by this program that I wanted to keep working. And I'm now the co-author of the current version of the Athletes as Leaders curriculum. I brought this program to my college as well, and updated it and made it applicable to the college campus context. And through this program, I have been meeting my alma mater's Middlebury College's NCAA Title IX attestation through my version of the college version of Athletes as Leaders at Middlebury College and Tufts University for the past 5 years. And now I'm back and hoping to continue giving as many people access to this program through the state of Washington as possible, having gone through its amazing impacts and the tools that it gives young athletes to be leaders in their community and preventing sexual and domestic violence. So I'm just happy and honored to be doing it for this community here today. Jessie Spinney is our lovely prevention coordinator. She will not be attending our training session today, but is a part of our prevention team and will be present for some of the future sessions that we will be hosting in December. And then, Ward, do you want to introduce yourself?
Am I unmuted now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Technical difficulties. I'm Ward Urian, and I'm the co-founder of TeamUp Washington, senior prevention strategist at Wiskative. We started TeamUp Washington as a way to bring these evidence-based, highly valuable programs, athletes as leaders and coaching boys and men, to coaches and athletic directors around the state of Washington. And we're just so fortunate to have Elise, with her practical hands-on experience, now leading the effort here with TeamUp Washington and getting coaches around the state trained in these really important programs. As a leadership development model, we think that these tools are invaluable for coaches to be able to leverage the social capital that student athletes have within their school communities to shift the community norms, what we expect from each other, the kind of behavior that we contract with on the daily, and how we see these programs building skills for student athletes to be able to actually shift the pH of the water that all of these kids are swimming in. And that we all know, especially since COVID, has been strained, and has been particularly challenging for the social emotional well-being of our students. And we believe that these tools can actually build resilience and skills that will make the well-being of students much more likely. And so super jazzed to be able to be working with Elise on this and to bring her skills and experience that were developed both through college and professional career using these tools, and seeing how they can be applied with the high school population and eventually also with middle school and below. So Elise, thank you so much. Take it away.
Perfect. Yes. So our purpose for the next little bit together is to just give us a general overview of the program, kind of the theories behind it, and some brief introduction into what is coming ahead in the coming sessions. So hopefully we'll just be able to breeze through and leave lots of time for questions. We're excited. Our purpose here is to really be able to create, to connect this model with the Skagit community. So as specific as we can make it, as applicable and relatable to your community needs as possible, is a recipe for success in the prevention of this for this community. So we're excited to do that. A little overview. What is Athletes as Leaders, right? This is a gender inclusive program for high school athletes. We model this as a leadership development tool. So our purpose is to create and give young athletes the skills that they need to take the social capital influence they already have in their communities, and to intentionally impact the social and cultural norms of their environments in positive ways that increase healthy team cultures and safer communities while developing social emotional skills. Beautiful. We are going to give a little introduction video into the program. This should be 2 to 3 minutes. Okay, let's try this again. Thumbs up if you can hear. Beautiful.
Most people look up to athletes and think like that they're a role model that they can follow.
I don't know, high school is definitely a time where you become like more self-conscious and aware of yourself with everything you're doing. There's no better time to learn about these things than right now, because it's kind of when we need it the most.
So sessions are a really intimate experience. I think for the team it's a great bonding experience for everyone. We're down in the theater room having just a normal conversation about things that happen, in everyday life and things that are difficult to talk about in other situations, but it makes it a really comfortable space. We talk about how relationships
should be and what respect looks like.
A few weeks ago, we were talking about consent and inequalities.
What I took away the most was that there are other people who care about this too. It gets that conversation going.
A lot of the things that I learned from it had to do with when a relationship isn't a healthy relationship.
You know, it really like let me express how I'm feeling, and it let me be who I wanted to be in there. And so when we leave, we just feel like a better person. We feel more confident in our game.
You can expect to learn a lot about your team and other people and kind of step into other people's shoes and think from their perspective.
The more you participate and the more you actually try to learn from it, the more you'll actually get from it.
There are a ton of valuable lessons that you can learn, and we're more bonded and more of a community.
Amazing. Okay, so as you heard from the high schoolers in that video, including myself, it's always fun to see my side part transition throughout the years. Glad to have left that in the past, but it's always so impactful to hear directly from high school students. These were my peers, these were my best friends, these are fellow athletes that I looked up to, and we were creating an environment at Garfield High School where every single team was going through either athletes as leaders or coaching boys into men. And this created a huge cultural shift in our high school during the years that that was happening. Like a lot of these athletes said, during such a critical time in youth development, when you are starting deeper connections, whether that be intimate relationships, friendships, or within teams, we understand that it's about how you relate to others and how you relate to yourself, and that these conversations allow a space for young people to speak plainly about the experiences, the narratives, and the realities that they're facing every single day in high school, in the athletic environment, in their families, and beyond. And so we want to root a little bit of this conversation into the current context of what high schools are facing today in our country and in our state specifically. Many of you might know these statistics or might understand the prevalence of sexual and domestic violence in schools and in our country, but we just want to kind of get on the same page. It's in order to create the culture that we want to be a part of, we have to first understand the culture that we are currently in. So we briefly go over that 1 in 3 US teens and 1 in 5 teens in Washington report experiencing some type of dating or sexual violence. That 74% of child sexual assault victims know their perpetrator well, so that these are instances of relationship where people already know each other. And this isn't the narrative that I was told in when I was in high school, that these are individual bad actors, often adults that are coming in with negative intention. Rather, that a lot of the harm that happens is peer-to-peer, from young people not having the tools they need to be able to relate to each other in ways that prioritize respect, equity, authenticity, and accountability. And that of the most vulnerable populations, we know that girls ages 14 to 19 are 4 times more likely to experience sexual assault than the general population. These statistics come from RAINN and the Sexual Violence Resource Center. We also got our statistics from the Healthy Youth Survey of Washington State. So the most recent and applicable statistic that we want to focus on really is the 1 in 5 Washington teens. And for me, this really hits the reality that in every team, we have survivors, we have perpetrators, and we have potentially athletes who are both who may not even know it. And that this creates the context that young people are navigating every single day, that gets carried on into college, that is handed down to us from previous generations, that makes this such a relevant and important part of a conversation that does belong in athletics. And that is where we are moving into. But before that, I know that this is potentially something that, or this is something we're all familiar, right? What some of these narratives or societal messages that are aimed at women and girls about how to prevent sexual assault, whether that's victim blaming. I also want to broaden this to societal messages aimed at men and boys about how perpetration happens, or even the flip side that men and boys can't be survivors of sexual assault or can't be sexually assaulted. And so I would love to invite us. You can unmute or use the chat. I'll bring us into full view here. What are some of the societal messages that are gendered about how to prevent sexual assault that kind of perpetuate these harmful narratives and harmful dynamics in our communities? Yeah, we had someone mention about how we dress, that the clothes we wear are interpreted as consent for interactions. Absolutely.
I think one is that people who have gone through both sexual and domestic violence, there's still so much like room for them to be blaming themselves. And I think not enough messaging around how, um, and like clarity around the sort of like culpability of the other person. And when we're young, we have a very hard time, not seeing ourselves as like part of the problem or part of the reason why it happened to us.
Absolutely. Yeah, the way that it's much easier to blame ourselves for what could I shouldn't have been alone. I shouldn't have been walking at night, right? I shouldn't have been drinking. I shouldn't have worn those things. I shouldn't have, let my friends pressure me into this situation. I shouldn't have done all these different things that are protective factors that may have put us in what we perceive to be a dangerous situation, that we should have known better than to potentially put ourselves in high risk situations. That narrative doesn't account for the reality that those harmful situations should never come to fruition in the first place, that we should never be surrounded or be in community and fear our safety, or fear that we might, and on the other side of the coin, that we might harm someone without meaning to, or without having clear intention about the ways that we are going into community. Yeah, does anyone else have anything to add to this? I mean, the list goes on and on, right? We have the picture of mace here as like a common form of protective measures, right? That should be like that is a normal part of a growing up into the world, that you should know how to protect yourself, right? This was Rebecca Milliman, is one of the amazing creator of Athletes as Leaders in its first iteration. And she really created this program partly as a response to this narrative that I think it also really became popular in 2016, late 2010s, of that young girls should be going to self-defense classes. And that like when I was going through high school, that was a really popular thing. People, like my friends, would host birthday parties in that were self-defense classes, and it was this girls empowerment movement, and it was this big rah-rah. And it's not to discount that there may be a place for that self-protection has a place in violence prevention. Well, I guess maybe not in violence prevention, but in the idea of self-defense. But that Rebecca really wanted to create a program that targeted prevention, that we should not be in positions, young women and young boys should not be in positions where they have to develop the skills to protect themselves from their own communities, and that communities should be taking accountability. These are all narratives and messages that we are all probably on board with. And so Athletes as Leaders became the tool for that in the community that she was targeting, right? And so she chose to use sports as the primary platform to prevent violence in the Garfield high school community. And there's a couple reasons for this. Um, Firstly, is that teams are actually a really great place to have these sensitive and vulnerable conversations because teammates have a foundation and a baseline of trust and vulnerability established that is intrinsic to these sports setup, right? We all understand as athletes and outside that in order to have a successful team, you need to be able to communicate with each other, especially about things that people may not want to hear, right? You need to know how to deliver constructive criticism. You need to know how to call each other out. You need to know how to be vulnerable and trust each other because that's the person who has your back on the field. So that these team environments are these micro communities that are created that are really well structured to get on the same page and move towards a common goal. That's the baseline of sports and the baseline of teams, and we can harness that structure when we are talking about shifting cultural norms. So there's this baseline of trust and vulnerability. We also know that athletes that the sports environment is a great place to it's a common vocabulary that young people can access and anyone in sports can access to talk about difficult things like unhealthy relationships, like how to navigate consent, like how we treat our bodies and other people's bodies, how we respect space, right? We can use all of this, we can talk about all these things and practice all these things in the sports environment because that's a part of what athletes are doing every single day, regardless, right? We need to on a simple sense, ask to borrow each other's equipment, right? You don't just go up and take someone's shin guards for the day without asking. You have to navigate how to be interacting with someone's body, right, on the field, creating lines and what is this team's level of physicality? Are we okay with slide tackling? This might be part of the rules, but this is also the team culture that you build and practice every day. How you communicate, how you support each other on the field, or when you're having a bad game or you had a bad day, instead of assuming the type of support that you might need, the best version of me as a teammate is to ask you, how are you feeling? What type of support might you need from me in this moment? And these are all social emotional tools that we know come from sports. We know that sports teaches life lessons. And to be able to harness that structure that is intrinsic into sports, especially during the high school development era, to be able to harness that structure to create new social and cultural norms within this micro team is impactful because of this third reason that athletes in high school and beyond have social capital in their communities. So that the theory that we've seen proven and that we see on a day-to-day basis, on a national level, on a global level, is that people are listening to athletes. Communities are looking to athletes to set the norms about what is okay, what is not okay, and on another sense, like what is cool and what is not cool. And so if we can harness the team culture and create a healthy team norms that athletes are bringing outside of their athletic identities into the schools, that healthy culture is one that spreads far and wide. And this is even more impactful as you have more and more teams harnessing their structure to create healthy and intentional team environments. And we've seen that to be true. Um, so these are some of the core principles that are embedded within the Athletes as Leaders program, right? We are looking to prioritize and amplify health and safety, inclusive and welcoming communities, empathy, consent, gender and racial equity, and youth leadership. And these might seem like obvious core principles, and they may not. We see these as values that require intention and structure to bring to the forefront of teams. We see these principles as ones that empower successful athletes on and off the field, that this creates a better environment for people to be more competitive, for people to be more caring, to navigate their relationships in ways that prioritize, that create room for their authentic presence, to make mistakes and to be re-invited and guided back into community. And that these core principles through athletes as leaders creates a very solid core that then athletes can take when they move about the world and they're um, faced with decision making every single day, and narratives handed down to them. Is this something I agree with? Is this aligned with the core principles about what it means to be an athlete on this team? And shifts, gives them the tools to shift from unhealthy norms into positive, social and emotional skill developing core principles that are outlined here in this program. In addition, these are some of the goals of the program, right? In alignment with the core principles, we hope to increase gender equitable attitudes, increase a sense of leadership, that connection and cohesion within your community, in the team community and beyond. That inclusion, support, and belonging is imperative to the team's success. That empathy and concern for each other is a part of what makes us like successful on and off the field, right? Increased willingness to intervene in situations of harm. So there's a bystander intervention aspect to these, and increased positive norms, right? Decreasing harmful norms, understanding healthy versus unhealthy relationship behaviors, and increasing caring ones and decreasing harmful ones. These are our goals of the program. We will talk later about kind of the impacts that we've studied and we've seen. But this is truly kind of at the core what we're hoping to create within a team culture and throughout a greater community. So these are some of the quotes. We saw them represented in the video that we saw, right? But that athletes really love, both athletes and coaches love this program, that these are topics that athletes are hungry to talk about, right? These are things that high schools are experiencing every single day. Gender inequality, right? Racial inequality, biases from their teachers, from their community members, from their peers. How do I overcome peer pressure and things that I don't agree with, but don't feel like I can address on my own? So this program becomes a tool for athletes on what to lean back on. How do I overcome some of these things? And for coaches as well, right? How we're talking about post-COVID era environments, right? And how do you, as a coach, help align your team? How do you get on the same page to move towards a common goal? And we found this program can be a really helpful tool in that. Because you can always refer back to what we learned in Athletes as Leaders is going to make us better people and better athletes on the field and better teammates, right? So I have become a more positive person on and off the court. From an athlete, from a coach, we heard that the program gave me the tools I needed to advocate for social justice, promote a culture of safety and respect, all while meeting my number one goal as a coach, which is to build confidence within my athletes on my team. Other athletes have said that Athletes as Leaders fundamentally changed me as a high school athlete. Going through Athletes as Leaders empowered me to challenge the unhealthy norms I encountered in college, right? This really critical moment in youth development that is high school that prepares and creates this foundation for what we encounter in college. As someone who works most of my time, I would say, well, 2/3 of my time I work with college athletes. So many of these conversations are like, well, we come from such different places. We have such different understandings about these topics as it relates to relationships and consent. And so to be able to inject as many of these tools as you possibly can as early as possible, right? We're hoping to address this even before high school. But the earlier we address it, the more successful we see athletes being and young people being as they continue in their lives, college and beyond, right? These are skills that people need for their whole life. Let's see. Moving into some of the national evaluation results. So this evaluation was done through the University of Pittsburgh, I believe, during its second or third year of the program going national. So we had 268 athletes on 12 different teams in 8 different states throughout the country. And we found statistically significant data proving an increased ability to identify abusive behaviors improved belief in gender equity and increased self-image and confidence in leadership ability of young athletes. And sorry, I was just reading the chat. This was very cool to see. I've experienced this and much more, not only as an athlete who went through this program, but also as an athlete who peer led this program with my teammates and someone who is now coming as a mentor, right? A former athlete teaching this to young people. These national evaluation results are don't quite show the impact, right? Like these are all positive things, and this is important to know. And that when you're in the room, doing the script, right, leading and facilitating these conversations, you can see the light and the stars in the eyes of your athletes, just having the freedom to talk about some of these things and set their own team norms, social norms for themselves for what might be the first time in their lives, right? And so I love that this is something that happens on a national level, and we are really the key to success in that is making it as specific as possible to the community that you're addressing, whether that be all the way down to the team level or like what we're doing here, we're trying to address it from a county level and have it you all take that magic of what we are offering and bringing it to the specificity of your community. So, how we are going to do that is through a couple sessions coming up. So, we have our first session on December 2nd and our second session 2 days later, December 4th. This is part of the kind of Zoom series that we are providing in our efforts to make this training as accessible and informative as possible. So, our first session, we are going to dive deeper into the context facing that young athletes are facing, specifically in Skagit County and in schools and in clubs, right? We are hoping to get a nice representation of who is attending the session, so we can make it as specific as possible. Erin just put the registration link in the chat, which is great. We are going to go through the program, what it looks like, right? How many sessions there are, what each of the topics are, why these are important and prioritized in our program. And just get a better sense of like what is the content that we're actually working with, right? When we talk about creating healthier and safer communities, what are the topics, what are the phrases, what are the questions that we're asking and prompting and facilitating for young athletes? And then on December 2nd, we are going through and we're going to rehearse some mock sessions. So we're going to actually get to go word for word through some of the scripts. We're going to think about our specific community, right? So if you're a coach, we want you to think about your team. What communities do they represent? Are you doing this within a school context? Are you doing this within a club context? What are some of the barriers or challenges that you might face implementing this program in your community, given the script and now that we know kind of the topics? And then based off of those challenges and perceived potential barriers, what steps and implementation do we need to take account of so that you are ready to start session one at the start of your season or whatever kind of time period you choose. So we are really hoping that after the end of these 2 sessions that you leave feeling really confident, excited, and prepared to implement this, potentially the next day. Obviously, the timeline is up to you all. But that is our goal, that is our hope. And that is the end of our kind of info session. We are going to move into some Q&A, which is perfect. We have about 20 minutes technically left on the Zoom. But thank you all for sticking through that and through our technical challenges. These are kind of the people that are helping support this work. And oh no. We have some FAQs lined up if anybody doesn't if we run out of questions. But I'm going to stop sharing for now and then let us kind of have a group conversation about any questions and or comments that people might have.
Elise, we do have a question in the chat for anyone who's not available during this training dates. Thoughts about offering another series, another training set of dates?
Yes,
in the future?
there we will continue to have training sessions. So the way that TeamUp Washington has been modeling these trainings is that we do about 3 a year. One of them we aim to do virtually, and these are open to the entire state. We will be going to different regions to kind of create accessibility to those different areas of the state. But trainings and recordings will be consistently going up throughout the year. We encourage you to sign up to the Wiskative newsletter or just continue getting in touch with Team Up Washington to know more specifically about those dates. Where do you have any dates right now that we can think of?
Yeah, well, in February, we're going to be doing a training in Vancouver that will be recorded and posted on the TeamUp website. That's TeamUp Washington, teamupwa.org. There are other recordings available there. And in addition to that, we, as Elise mentioned, we do one webinar every year that is available to everybody across the state. We also anticipate, and we do have recordings available on both our website as well as the athletesasleaders.org, which has session by session training available for you, so you can go through that training as well. So yeah, for sure, that is one option. Also, if you're interested in doing this with strictly male sports teams, I would encourage you to go to coachescorner.org and you can look for training opportunities there through that website.
As a clarification, this is a common question that we get is Athletes as Leaders specifically a program for athletes on girls' teams? And that was the original, that was the first iteration of Athletes as Leaders. It was created as a counterpart to the Coaching Boys into Men program. So Coaching Boys into Men is a similar sexual and domestic violence prevention program for athletes specifically on boys' teams. And although Athletes as Leaders was created as like the girls' version of Coaching Boys into Men, the current script and the current curriculum is completely gender inclusive. So we do encourage the option of using Athletes as Leaders for any and all teams, especially we highly recommend it for like co-ed teams or all gender teams who train or compete across genders. But we are still in the process of like making that update in the website. So there are places in the program or the website that might state that it is specifically for athletes on girls' teams, and that is not representative of the curriculum. The script itself is completely gender inclusive.
So the 2 dates in December are for the Skagit community. Then there'll be the February dates for Vancouver, and then you'll announce a date when there's the statewide webinar, correct?
Yes. Yeah, we'll have that statewide webinar. Actually, we just concluded one on November 6th. So that recording is available on our website. And we do have it's anticipated, we're hearing from a lot of our communities. One of the things, so Team Up Washington started with the notion that we would bring coaches from around the state to Seattle, to the Puget Sound region, to conduct training here with incentivized options available through our professional sports teams partners, the Seahawks and the Mariners. Then COVID happened and travel budgets were wiped out. And so we have since been hearing from our constituents and partners around the state that, you know, as much as we'd love to come to Seattle, we really just don't have that capacity within our current budgets or schedules available to us. And so would you please entertain coming to us? And so this last summer, we actually initiated our first regional training in Spokane. Then Vancouver is going to be in for the spring of 2026 sports season. And then we anticipate the other thing we're adjusting is that we used to do the training for fall sports usually in August, which is when we conducted the Spokane training. We're also hearing from coaches that their summers are already packed, and to have the capacity to attend one of our summer trainings is really challenging. And so we're probably going to move those fall sports trainings up into May or June before school gets out. So look forward to another training in May or June. We don't have that date or location set yet. We're hoping to craft that one in a simulcast setting so we can do that live to participants around the state, no matter where we actually hold it.
Can I ask a general question?
Yes.
I'm the head tennis coach here at Lake Stevens High School for both boys and girls.
Excellent.
I'm also the intervention specialist at the school, so I do, if you're a tennis coach, you're a counselor already, just to let you know that much. But there's a lot of those skills that certainly apply at the net posts, at the turnarounds, and but we've done some team stuff too. Tennis is a lonely sport sometimes, but we've done some team stuff about where I've brought up consents and the prevalence of people perceiving or experiencing not the consent norms that we're teaching and that kind of stuff. So using healthy survey data and stuff like that. But it's hard to carve that time out as a coach. I think if I'm honest, I want to coach tennis. So there's a lot of skills to work on, and I'm really I'm worried about somebody's serve, and it's just very easy to get sort of myopic about my job as a sports coach in terms of every minute I get. And so I just wonder what you've experienced already, because I know I'm not the only coach that would say that. And so how have you, sold the idea of spending some time really with your team? And time is the challenge. In my sport, it's a ton of challenge. There's a bunch of inequities in terms of access to indoor court, off-season play, things like that. So I'm in a school that doesn't have as much access to that, and so I'm like catching up. I have just a massive list of things to try to accomplish as a coach. So anyway, just I know that question's been answered, discussed, I'm sure, just based on the program here, and of course I care about the goals and values that you've already shared here quite a bit. And that's part of who I am. But so I'll just open it up I'd like to listen.
Yeah. And I'll let Elise talk to this too. But what we found with some fairly elite athletic programs around the state that have implemented this year over year is that the value that they get from the 15 to 20 minutes per week that they spend on these sessions with their teams is just invaluable in shifting and shaping the culture of that team to be one where the team dynamics become that of a winning team as a result of really spending the time in looking at what kind of a team do we want to be, and then and the agreements and the kind of both tacit and active commitments that we make toward one another in that team environment leads to more successful teams. And we have limited data on that, and I don't have like objective proof, but I have enough anecdotal evidence from the many coaches around the state and the country that have implemented this to show that it definitely impacts the attitude and the approach to the team that I think is the perfect leverage point to making teams more successful. And Elise has been on teams that have used this at the most elite level of sports. I'd let her speak to that from her experience as well.
Yeah, I would say just from a logistics standpoint, first and foremost, we understand, and our primary goal is to make this program as accessible as possible for coaches who are exactly in your position. So thank you for asking that question, right? That you care about the health and safety and well-being of your athletes. You also want them to achieve their most competitive potential. And that there's just not a lot of time to do that in a packed schedule. So the structure of the program is really created around those kind of three things. and that the time commitment we are asking is 20 minutes once a week for 11 weeks. So that realistically, and that you can implement this program like literally on the court. You have your team circle up, you go through a 20-minute script, they have a little active conversation, and then you break and you're into practice. So that the structure of the program is meant to be implemented regardless of where you are, right? You can do it in the parking lot. You could do it in a different space, right? You don't need screens, you don't need phones, you don't need anything except for like that group and a little bit of time. So we want it to fit in with the like high paced, kind of like motivating and engaging aspect of like the energy that we're requiring from athletes during practice. And then the other thing I would say is I would share like a quick anecdote. I was doing this with a track and field team, which is another similarly like where they're individual competitors, they're competing individually, but their team environment is really impacting their performance. And that we were doing the session on body image, and in deciding what is something that we can do as a team to increase our bodily autonomy and confidence that we have around our bodies and our athletic bodies, is they decided as a group, and this is like a team of like 80 athletes, right? Track and field is really big, that all compete in different genders, in different, what are like different races. Some of them are doing javelin, some of them are on the track, but they all come together at the end of practice and they all do abs, right? And they decided as a group that they wanted to call that core. That like instead of calling it abs, we're going to call this core, because that's what it is, right? It's not a pressure to have abs or to have a six pack, even though that is a huge pressure, an internal and an extrinsic factor and narrative that they are hearing about what type of athletes they should be and how they should look competing. That doesn't actually have anything to do with their performance. And they all understood that on an individual level. And collectively, when they came together, they were able to set that new norm within their team that did a lot of the coaching for that program, right? They're actually taking the time to coach themselves into making themselves better athletes by harnessing the leverage that that community has. And making it an intentional and positive impact on the individual performance of each athlete. So I think that that's like a simple example of the ways that these spaces create the opportunity for athletes to be their own best coach, and that this isn't something that they're not already thinking about, right? It's like these are narratives and environments and pressures that are existing, whether we talk about it or not, whether we acknowledge it or not. And that your role as a coach, our role as leaders and power holders and deciders of space and time are just to create opportunities for them, for young people to create the cultures that they want to be a part of.
Yeah, and I'll just share a little bit that we've been doing this program at O'Day High School for years, and at least 10 years. And Monty Kohler, who's the athletic director and head football coach at O'Day, has had a pretty storied career in success at the state level. And he said that, at first he was very skeptical about the amount of time that it was going to take and about their ability to carve this out. And yet just last year had a catch up interview with him, just wanted to see how it was going. And he said, for the amount of time that we invest in this program, we actually are more efficient as a team. We've actually saved time in terms of addressing problematic behaviors, in terms of like dealing with challenges in terms of endorsement of our team norms. That's all kind of gone away. And what we instead enjoy is like this just up-leveled expectation about what we expect from one another as teammates and as coaches. And this is the other thing too. I think that while this program is directed at athletes, coaches have reported back to me that they benefit tremendously from the kind of setting of norms among them as a coaching team. and how that has also led to greater both success as well as efficiency in how that they practice and how they run their teams.
I also had kind of a clarification question. Um, uh, my name is John. I'm the athletic director and the director of safety for the South Whidbey School District. So it was something that was said at the very beginning, and it was a discussion about kind of harmful narratives. Um, and also as a father of a 15-year-old girl, um, we the South End, right, this community where people don't lock their cars, they don't lock their houses, and so when our kids leave here, they are very usually pretty unaware of their presence in the world and some of the dangers that are out there. And so I wanted to make sure we were talking about some of those narratives in a response of like, you don't own the blame, right? Regardless of how you dress, if something happens to you, you don't own the blame. I just want to make sure it's not saying that those aren't factors, right? That being aware of your surroundings and being aware of your at, like, I absolutely, our community needs that. Like our young women need to be taught that, like, hey, if you feel like if you know that you're maybe if you are going to go downtown, maybe you do take a friend, right? Doesn't have to be a female friend, doesn't have to be a male friend, but maybe you travel in pairs, and that should be for our young men too, right? Because but the data shows that women are much more susceptible to violence than men, and so we should at least be having. I just want to make sure we're still having those conversations that the world is a dangerous place. How you interact with that world, right, shouldn't affect how it does, but there are some things that you can do to take care. So I just want to make sure that that's part of the messaging, and not that we're telling folks that it's okay to be out
Yeah,
there.
I mean, I think that there are varying levels of prevention, right? So like
Yep.
we can talk about the fact that that we want to shift cultural and societal norms that will ultimately lead to a shift in that expectation of saying no means just try harder, right? Like that's one of the things that we want to shift for sure as a primary prevention strategy, right? That we know is going to have much wider protective value across cultures and societies and communities. At the same level, we also know that the information that young women and girls receive around the responsibility that lays on them to protect themselves is out of whack with those norms, right? And so I think we definitely know that even just among peers, especially female peers that are going off to college, that the level of shared expectation that we're going to have to protect ourselves, that is a pretty extensive and very exhaustive amount of information that's shared among peers for women going off as freshmen to college. And while that is important, and as Elise mentioned earlier, that is a form of prevention, but it's a prevention mechanism at the tertiary level that we want to say, yeah, that's important, but it can't be the only thing that we rely on about how we shift our norms. And I think that that's one of the things that I want to also talk about is what this curriculum and offering this program in your schools does is it opens the conversation and provides permission for student athletes as well as athlete to coach. It also increases the communication between athletes about those kinds of things. What do we need to do? Like, okay, we want to shift the social norms that give some kind of permission to folks with power to take and get whatever they want. We also know that until those norms shift and change, we're going to have to take a level of personal responsibility for each other, for ourselves, and for each other, right? Like, how do we also stand up and protect one another and have each other's backs? And that would, extend beyond woman to woman athlete and be also on young men and boys to say, hey, no, these are my sisters. These are the women that I care about. And we're going to take it upon ourselves to have some protection and understanding that we're responsible for one another. And we're not only for our physical safety, but what we hope is also extended is that it's beyond physical safety to social emotional and psychological well-being as well. That we have a mutual responsibility for each other, right?
No, that's great. That's a conversation I have a lot down here, is getting young men to understand what it's like. We'll never understand what it's like, but what it's like to move through the world as a woman, and like the small things that you are doing that are sending certain messages of unsafety. No, and I appreciate it. We've seen an uptick in sexual assaults at the school. The interesting thing is that 50% of them have been committed by females on males, which has been a giant shift so I like the idea of addressing it with our gender teams, and then really using like track. We got 130 kids out there. That's about a 60-40 mix. Having that conversation of what it's like to move through, like what is each one's experience like, and kind of developing a shared understanding. So I appreciate what you're doing. I look forward to the second and third.
I think this is the real, I would say, having done predominantly coaching boys and men for the last 20 years with coaches around the state, I would say athletes as leaders provided a whole different level of conversation coeducationally between genders, but also among women about not only what the expectations are for themselves and how they are going to protect themselves, but also like, what does this mean for my expectations about how I conduct myself in dating relationships and within both same-sex relationships as well as between in mixed gender relationships, and how a lot of women have reported back. I've heard anecdotal stories about how this understanding and shared understanding of how power is experienced in relationships, and how athletes as leaders opened their eyes to that dynamic, that before it wasn't fully and explicitly okay to talk about that. Like this opens the door for young women to be able to have really frank conversations about how power is seen and distributed and used in relationships, and how they have a responsibility as well, to not only for themselves but also for their male peers, of being able to share information and have that be centered in an empathic way rather than a blaming or a stigmatizing conversation, which I think that's the other thing that we have seen, right? Where in a vacuum, without information, we resort to some of those polarizing and blaming and blame shifting conversations, rather than one of like, hey, listen, we're all in this together. How do we take care of one of each other, and how do we get the relationships that we want?
I work in a building of 800 6th through 12th graders. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yes.
We're concurrently, doing tier 1, universal healthy relationship presentations. Our counseling team is delivering them through history classes in both 11th and 12th grades. So all of that, all of that content on what is consent and reversible and, ongoing, and what about online and sexting and phones and all that stuff. So we're having pretty meaty, important conversations about that stuff with students, and and talking about trust and power and resources and all that stuff. That's with all of our
students. Great.
So
that's great.
That foundation can be there for our athletes to pick up the conversation in a smaller group. And I love small groups. I run small groups here in the school during the day. I understand their power quite well. So I like that model in general as well. So thanks for that concept. But just wanted to let you know that I think that there are healthy relationship curricula being implemented, integrated into schools, high school level, at various levels. I'm not sure where every district is at. I know where we're at, and we have a bomber team, and we're doing good work. But so that's just another thing that there's momentum, I think, of this language and these concepts rolling out at probably different paces in different districts and different locations, and making them.
And that's awesome. I mean, I think what we know is that the more that we can reinforce those kinds of normative and value-based educational opportunities. So you have that going on in health classes. History, I've never heard that being done in history class. That's awesome. I'm so glad that it's being done outside of the health class environment. But this is where reinforcing that through and using the social capital that student athletes enjoy on their campuses really adds value to that kind of educational implementation. And so, so that it's not just something that we heard about in class. This is being reinforced in a variety of settings around the ecosystem in the school.
And I would add to that we see, and I see this especially in the college situation, right, where it's like people know, or they can define what consent is, but that being able to apply it in your day-to-day situations and relationships or parts of your life that are most meaningful to you are two completely different skill sets. And that like knowing what consent is, yeah, and practicing consent are two very different things. And the cool part about doing it in a team setting is you get to set new norms within your team, where it's like, oh, like, okay, we're gonna decide to ask before posting pictures of each other on social media. Cool. And then you start practicing that, right? The act of being like, hey, like, can I post this picture on Instagram is a completely different thing than knowing that that situation could require consent. Is like that's where like the practice becomes right, exactly. It's like practicing your sport.
Thank you so much for everybody who has shared, and to Elise and Ward. And I want to keep talking about this because it's so rich, but I also want to recognize that we have gone a little bit over time and pass it back to Erin to wrap us up. And then anyone who wants to stay is welcome to.